Hello and welcome to Now and Zen, the podcast about microtonal and Zen harmonic music. Today's guest is Subhraag Singh, and he is here to promote his software called the Infinitone. Hello.
Yeah, it's called Infinitone DMT, or Infinitone Dynamic Micro-Tuning Software.
Is it a coincidence that it, sounds like DMT, because it reminds me of the drug a little bit?
Well, we knew the software should be titled Infinitone because we just love that word. And then I had called it Infinitone Dynamic Microtuning Software. And then we were searching for like the complete name for it. And one of the programmers said, well, why don't you call it Infinitone DMT, Dynamic Microtuning? And I thought, sounds great. And there were no substances ingested in the process of creating the software, but DMT is a chemical that is produced naturally in living beings, and we wouldn't say that there's a total disconnect from that.
I see.
Music, the inspiration for things come from inside, and it comes from the imagination and comes from the deep states of creativity. And I think all of these things are connected.
Absolutely. I can tell that the software embodies that kind of spirit from the demo that you sent me. You sent me a little sound file where you talk about some different pieces and how they use microtones to great effect and what the Infinitone can do.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly is the Infinitone software? I don't think I really understand it.
Yeah, well, it's the world's first professionally crafted dynamic microtuning plugin for your DAW, and also standalone application. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. Basically, it empowers any musician, and I think basically every musician should have this in their toolkit to break free from the standard 12-tone chromatic scale and make microtuning an integral part of the creative process. Visual artists have Pantone. They have total freedom of color, and that's an integral part of the creative process for visual artists. And so now musicians can have freedom of pitch.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So really, Infinitone fulfills the roles of lots of different things. Like I've heard about people trying to retune their software, but via other software. Like maybe if they've got a VST, they're trying to retune it into something. Like I've done that with Maximus P, but I always have to build it myself, and it's very annoying. And whenever something like that happens, it's always super, super clunky. So the fact that the software is coming out and can finally just be stuck in as a plugin and handle it all is really, really exciting.
Yeah, we're really, really excited about it. Basically, we built it because we want to hear great new music. Like, I'm just excited to hear what people do with this. And it's built by musicians and for musicians. So we wanted it just to be able to drop into a musician's workflow, and we want it to be inspiring and intuitive and creative and really easy to use. Basically, it's a MIDI effect. You drop it in between your MIDI controller, whatever that is, and your synth and a MIDI effect. And it's basically, you have access to a whole huge range of well-organized presets, and you just click on a scale and you play the scale. And if you want to try another scale, then you click on that one and you play that one. So there's no need to get started, at least, there's no need for, complex theoretical knowledge or anything. If you have a 7-note JI scale mapped to the white keys, you can just, dive in and go.
I see. So there's not any need for somebody to be a scale smith either. Like in lots of situations, you have to know how to construct a scale. But in this sort of situation, you've just got scales available to try and click on.
Well, we have something for everybody here, so most people who are going to be, most people in the music world at this point are not familiar with microtonality, and this is going to be new for them. So I wanted to make it easy for those people, because it can be very, very intimidating open up, say, Scala, and you just have no idea what's going on. It can take, months to just even figure out the basics. So I wanted to be able to make it easy and intuitive for people. Like I invite children into my studio. I have a 5-year-old son, and he brings his friends, and I just pull up a scale and they just start jamming, and it sounds great. So
That's so cool.
But at the same time, so there's tuning generators. So, and custom scale, tools. So you can generate your own scale. We have, harmonic scale generator. We have sort of an additive scale generator that you can do linear tunings and MOS and lattices, equal divisions. A lot of people ask me, is it just octave based stuff, or can you do non-octave? It's totally free. You can do whatever repeat ratio you want. And so if you it's a bit like a synth. You download a new synth, you try out all the presets, you find a synth that you like, a sound that you like, and you can start tweaking it. Same thing. You can, if you want to change the tuning a little bit, you can change the tuning of the notes. Or like a synth, you can build a new sound from the ground up. So that's what the generators are for, and the custom tools are for. And the great thing about it is all of the parameters are programmable. You can manipulate them in real time, or you can automate them. So it turns tuning from a noun, which it has been in the past. You pull up your tuning and you do your piece, and that it turns it into a verb. So you can use tuning as part of the expressive part of your music, not just something that's kind of hanging out in the background.
Yes, and there's so much to be done in that area. In the same way that non-12-tet Zen harmonic music is the tip of an absolutely massive aesthetic iceberg, the even more exponentially larger one is, well, now what happens when tunings glide into each other?
Yeah. Well, we have that. It's called morphing. So you can select one tuning and you can select another tuning, and you can literally slide, in between them. So you can find a space in between, and it's not just one tuning to another. It can be one, it's totally free. So whatever you want to morph, you can morph from one thing to another. And
oh my goodness, that is like a dream come true. No more like using Maximus P and dynamic tonality, like clunky interfaces that aren't in a DAW. You can just automate this like anything.
No, there's nothing clunky about it. It's like totally streamlined. It's integral part of the user interface. You just pick one scale, pick another one, and we have some I have some musical examples prepared. We can play one of those morphing examples later. And also on top of that, basically the inspiration for morphing came from my time when I was in India, mm-hmm. and I was studying some Indian classical music, and my teacher was talking about how instruments like the voice and stringed instruments, fretless string instruments, are ideal for Indian classical music because you can slide in between all of the notes and get all this fine expressive nuance. And I thought, well, what about polyphonic sliding?
Oh yes, yes, please.
That's a whole new domain of possibility that has never been available before in any software. And so that's one, and that's something that even 12ET people can use. Like, why not slide from C to F?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that in some barbershop tags where they drag the slide out like a lot. Like Instant Classics got one where they all change parts, which is really funny. And then at the end, they're like doing this really, really insane slide in the ending tag where they're all on the opposite part of their voice range, and then they cross each other and go down to the other octaves. So in between, the sliding is just like so microtonal.
Oh wow, that sounds amazing. What's that called?
It's just like,
what's the name of the group? Where have you? I've never heard.
Instant Classic. It's called You Gotta Change Parts. It's not like Zen harmonic in any way, but the slide at the end is just so long and impressive that like it almost seems a bit too long for a slide, which is kind of exciting. So that I think it gets you to hear the in-betweenness of that a little bit more.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I got to check that out.
Polyphonic sliding is something that I think I really want to get into personally, and I've heard a lot of other people talk about it. I've seen it in Christopher Bailey's music for extended periods of time using like guide tracks. There definitely should be a piece where somebody is singing along and their notation, instead of it being discrete pitches, is just like a continuous pitch graph of pitch height.
Absolutely. That'd be amazing. Well, see, that's one of the things you can do. This is built to work with synthesizers, right? But you can compose your music with a synthesizer and then perform it with voices. So you can have a backing track, or you can use it as a learning tool and then perform it with real instruments. In fact, that's my goal, is just to get back to real instruments, to use the synthesis as a sort of a stepping stone to new possibilities with voice and instruments that we already have, and creating new instruments as well.
That's fantastic. It kind of reminds me of Syntel's software, which also allows you to glide around, but I don't believe that it's a plugin. I believe it's a standalone.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to check that out as well.
So when did you have the idea to make this software a plugin?
Well, let's see. Well, I'll step back to maybe the beginning of my entrance into microtonality. I mean, basically, I'm a saxophone player, studied jazz, performed jazz, and composer. And I grew bored of the music that I had been experiencing and kind of stopped for a number of years. But the music didn't, I tried to run away from the music, but it didn't run away from me. It kept following me around, and I was getting dreams of music that were just, I would wake up and I'd be like, that's the most amazing music I've ever heard. And then I would try to play that music on the piano and I couldn't find the notes. Yeah. So, but for years, it never occurred to me that there were more than 12 notes, just because that's ingrained in all of the music education and everything like that. I just didn't even think about it. And then I was studying music in India and getting some of that. And then I came back from India and I started to play some of that on the piano. I was like, that just doesn't sound right either. And then, and also when I was in India, my teacher I mentioned before was talking about sliding, with the voice and stringed instruments. And so I had the idea, well, I'm a saxophone player. Why don't I invent a sliding saxophone? Then that idea kind of, I don't know, it didn't come to realization for a little bit. And then I got back to the West, and I was born and raised in America. And then I met a lady from Germany while I was in India, and we got married, and I moved to Germany. So now I'm in Germany. And so I got back to Germany, and so I started trying to play some music again, but I just couldn't find the notes. And then I found a video on YouTube about piano temperaments. I don't know how I found it. I just stumbled randomly upon it, and I realized, oh, wait, there's more than 12 notes. And then that quickly led to just intonation, and it led to information about Irv Wilson.
Yes.
And I saw Stephen James Taylor, who is one of my all-time favorite microtonal composers. He made a film about Irv Wilson, and I saw it's called Surfing the Sonic Sky. And I saw that, and I was like, okay, that's my life. I'm hooked. No turning back now. Like, I was just, I'm all in. And so I went to, try and figure out, how am I going to do all this? And I was just sort of really disappointed. There's not really very many tools. So the first thing I started out to do was I pursued my idea of building a sliding saxophone. And I thought, well, it's going to be really hard to learn a sliding saxophone, so I will use technology to help me out, and I'll put some motors on it, and I'll make several slides, and I'll connect those motors with an Arduino and make a Max app, and then I can make a saxophone that can play any tuning at any time. And that instrument was called also the Infinitone. That's the original Infinitone, is a sort of the saxophone of the future.
Yes.
And that instrument went on to win first prize at the 2017 Gothman New Musical Instrument Competition. And so that was really satisfying, to build an instrument and to play it and then to win this competition. And so that sort of launched my career, you could call it, in microtonality. And my idea was, well, of course, I want to make this fantastic instrument available to people who want to play it. So I thought I would build it and manufacture it and improve it and make it available commercially. But I was just really frustrated with the tools that were available for composing and performing microtonal music. There weren't very many that were very satisfying to work with. I mean, there's some good stuff out there, but it's either clunky or you have to know a lot about microtuning to make it work, and it just was not a satisfying process. So speaking of Macs, I started building my own microtuning software in Macs, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to make some microtuning software available to the public before I bring Infinitone to the public, the instrument. And so I built a sort of the tuning program of my dreams in Macs, and it's a prototype, and it's working very, very well. And I started showing it to some people, and they thought, well, why don't we? I showed it to my uncle and a couple of my cousins, and they thought it was amazing. They jumped on board, and they said, let's make a little team. Let's rebuild this thing from the ground up with professional programmers. So my cousins, they're also musicians and also innovative and creative, and so they found a couple of programmers to get going. And so we've taken the core concept of my Macs program and just rebuilt it from the ground up, so that way I can work as a plugin in your DAW in a standard workflow. And so because when you have the inspiration as a musician, you get the feeling you want to make music. You just want to go. You want to dive in and start creating, and you want to be able to save your sounds. You want to be able to save your scales. You want to be able to share them or copy them or transfer them. All of the things that we do in a DAW, all of the things that are great as part of the modern music workflow, we want. And so we thought, we're going to make this a plugin, and it's going to be challenging. It's not going to be easy, and it's hasn't been easy, but it has been interesting and fun. And so we're basically like days away from having the final beta version ready, and we're going to go into some last rounds of testing, and assuming everything goes well, we'll be releasing it in the next weeks, early 2021. So mid end January, hopefully. But we do have a website. It's infinitone.com. That's infinitone.com. And you can go and sign up for the email list there and be notified when it's ready. And you'll be the first to get a generous early bird discount for the launch. And you can also find a little bit more information about the software there right now. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing, that whole story. So you've really got a whole team kind of helping you. And are they also interested in microtonal music, or are they more into programming, or both, or?
Well, I mean, what's great about it is it's really a family affair. Like my uncle and my cousins, saw this, and they wanted to participate. So it's a really great little small indie team that we have going on. And my cousins, they're musicians. They live and breathe music. They don't do it always. It's just part of their life. And they hadn't had any experience with microtonality, but they saw the potential in it, and so they're assisting me with a wide variety of things. Then one of my cousins found the programmers. And he found a programmer, and then the programmer found needed some help because he thought he couldn't do everything himself. He just in an amount of time, and he hired one. He brought in one of his friends as a suggestion. And it just so happens by pure coincidence that this second programmer is really well versed in microtonality, which
wow,
really, really, really helps. So I'll come up with an idea to propose to him, and he'll say, well, I'm not sure if that'll work because of this and this and this. And then he'll come up with an idea, and I'll say, well, I'm not sure if that'll work because of this and this and this. And so it's been a really fantastic collaborative process where we're all kind of working together and bouncing ideas around and solving problems and trying to release the best dynamic microtuning plugin that we can.
Well, yes, this is very groundbreaking. So
Yeah.
then how is it different from other tuning programs that use pitch bend to retune, or does it operate in a similar way?
Well, it primarily the primary function is to retune synths with pitch bend. So obviously you can do that with almost any synth monophonically, which a lot of the times you are just using a synth monophonically for a single voice and a piece. If you want polyphony, then you do need multiple channels. And now with the advent of MPE, many synths do have MPE support. Of course, you can also just put multiple instances of a synth in different channels, and that will also work. Hope MIDI 2.0 is coming soon, so really excited about that, but it's not supported yet. That'll make things easier. And it also does MIDI tuning standard dumps. So if you have a analog synth like I do, the Dave Smith instruments, I have a Prophet Rev 2, you can just dump the tuning on there, and it can work directly on the synth. So obviously you can create. So in terms of the functionality of the way some of the other software has worked, it's somewhat similar, but the huge difference is the ease of use. There's a big scale display at the top where you can see the scale, the spacing of the notes. You can see the colors of the notes either on a sort of a rainbow kind of color wheel kind of scheme, or you can see prime based colors, and then below it are all the other scales in your preset. You can have a list of 64 scales that can be displayed all at once, and you click on it and it goes to the main scale on top. So it's just really easy and intuitive. You click on a scale, you see it, you play it, and move on. And also the fact that all of the parameters are dynamic. So everything is expressive and dynamic and moving, and you can choose it in real time, and you can save, there's no other, microtuning program that does any of this stuff and save it in a DAW as a plugin and be in your standard workflow.
Oh, wow. I cannot wait. So you say it loads 64 different tunings?
Well, the basic concept is there's a bank, there's 4 banks of, or there's a section of master sets. There's a bank of master sets, and you can have 4 master sets because a lot of microtuning systems have a larger number of notes. Say you're working with 53 ET or 128 harmonics or whatever system that you like, big lattice. But the challenge is that obviously with these larger groups of notes, that it's can be cumbersome and difficult to play. So the idea is you have master sets and then subsets. So you can choose whatever subset that you want at any given time for your composition. And you can play a subset of 7 notes, just a single scale for the whole composition, or you could move from scale to scale or chord to chord as you please. So you can choose 64 subsets, and those are right down in the middle. It's easy to see. You can see the spacing of the notes. You can title them and jump around and use them as you please.
Oh, that is going to solve so many problems. Because before, of course, what you would have to do for something like that, what I would be planning to do for something like that is I have a piece where I play in different subsets of an EDO that hasn't been performed yet. Yeah. And so I set up like a track in like 9 different tracks in Reaper that all have the same instruments. And I set up 9 different points where they're all at the proper volume, and then use markers to mark them, and then press the number on my keyboard to jump to that one in between to change tunings.
Yeah, and yeah, well, you won't have to do that anymore. It'll be you can do that all in one plugin and automate the tunings within your DAW. No problem.
Well, from what we've heard about the Infinitone, I think everyone who's working with microtonality is going to need to check this out, and they're going to be impressed with what sorts of capabilities are offered. What's another good example of something that the Infinitone will do with dynamically changing tuning that is useful and not found on other software?
Well, for example, um, common tone modulation, JI common tone modulation. So if you,
Oh,
you can get common tone modulation in 12 ET. You can do, a 1-6-2-5-1 chord progression, but you can do a 1-6-2-5-1 chord progression in JI, and your pitch could drift. So basically, you can, because it's dynamic, you don't have to be fixed in any one place. You can go anywhere that you want at any time. So if you want to stay within a temperament, stay within a single place, or you can fly around and float. It's freedom of pitch. So
I
that's the
see.
main thing. It's only limited by your imagination.
Yes. So is there a way that the software handles drift that's friendly to read mathematically? For example, let's say you have a chord progression that drifts by the syntonic comma and it continues to drift maybe like 3 times in a row. Now, of course, it's easy to say that the progression has simply drifted 3 times in a row, and every time that happens to simply reassign the syntonic comma as 1/1. But if you wrote those as JI ratios from the original pitch, you'd get this horrible string of digits that you just have to know about in advance. So I don't know if there's anything to address that in the software, or how that is even handled. I'm very excited to hear kind of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, well, one of the dynamic parameters is the fundamental frequency. So you can modulate the fundamental frequency however you want. So that way you can, if you're drifting away from, say you have a limited number of notes in your scale, and you don't want to get into these like really large exotic, prime numbers, then when you want to change your fundamental, you can just change the fundamental. So that way you always have, and you can, there's a list of, of sort of modulation parameters. So you can easily change based on common tone modulation or shifting by a comma or however you want. You can easily change just the fundamental, and that way you keep all of your ratios within a very easy and readable domain.
Wow, that's powerful. I cannot wait to try that out.
Yeah, some of the musical examples that I have prepared for you, we can listen a little bit later, are employ these techniques. So we can demonstrate those.
Exactly. So who would you say this software is really for?
Well, my personal vision is that every musician has this in their toolkit, because we all use pitch, and we're all using pitch as a part of our musical expression now, whether we know it or not. But in terms of specifics of genres and people, well, I would say you could start off with just saying people who are doing music, musicians who are doing music in 12 notes already, and they want to add some JI chords for a little sweetness or spice and some spice to their melodies. You can just throw in some extra expressive techniques, or you want to detune a little bit. There's also a beating function. The notes can beat. You add a second note to it. So we can kind of call that genre group of people 12 plus, people who are working within 12, but just they want to add a little extra, something unique. I think obviously, since it's a DAW plugin, people who are working in DAWs and doing electronic music like hip hop and EDM, hip hop producers, EDM producers, pop producers, and you want to create a unique hook, and you have a melody that sounds, fresh and, unique and catchy, but that stands out from all of the rest of the crowd. Because how many hooks can there be really in 12 ET? I've kind of beaten that that thing to death. Everything's starting to sound the same. So there's a lot of people out there who, there's people out there who want to sound like everybody else, and that's fine. But I think a lot of musicians, they want to stand out of the crowd. They want to stand out of the masses and create something unique. So you can create some unique hooks, fresh beats, doing things what other producers are not doing, catch people's attention.
Yeah.
Then obviously, film composers, to create, new and more expressive emotions to sort of underscore, what's going on in the film. indie rock people, indie rock musicians. You have your guitars. You can, there's a lot of bands out there that are coming out with refretted guitars. But then you could play, let's say, some power chords and do some microtonal scales on top of that. And voices are always microtonal, and now your instruments can also be microtonal. Orchestral performers who want to learn, and choir singers who want to learn better about intonation and how to play with other musicians, and just intonation and temperaments and all of those things. I think a huge thing is just musicians from non-Western cultures. There's a lot of musicians out there that I've talked to that have sort of inherited this absolutely wonderful and rich musical culture, but they don't have a way to communicate that with other musicians who might come along from maybe a different culture. I showed this prototype of my software to my teacher in India, and he was just, his jaw dropped to the floor because he thought, wow, now I have a way to communicate everything that I hear and everything that I know, and I have a way to communicate that with people. Because before it was just sort of this esoteric, very difficult thing that didn't have a really good way of transmitting, except for these studying with a master and practicing for many, many hours, and all. Now you can pull up these scales and play them directly. There's going to be a whole bank of authentic non-Western tunings. So say you want to play with an oud player or a sitar player, or play with a gamelan orchestra and jam along with them, and you want to innovate and take things further into the future. So both, you're preserving the culture by being able to understand what you're doing, but you're also innovating by, perhaps adding some new instruments or fusing some other ideas in there. And then also, trailblazer musicians who are going to create the paradigm shift music of the future. There's all kinds of things that could happen that we can't even now conceive because of our limited resources and limited technology. There's all kinds of tunings that are sitting there that are absolutely wonderful that have never been used. So
it's crazy to think about how many there are and just how underused it has been. I almost think that, well, perhaps in future music, when microtonality is as commonplace as 12-tet, I think that's going to cause a lot of social changes that we are not prepared to truly understand yet.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is it's a huge political, cultural, social movement. I mean, this is going to affect every area of our life. I mean, it's it's kind of mind blowing to think about. If microtonality becomes as ubiquitous and sort of accepted as 12-ET is now, I mean, that's the world that I want to live in. Like, no question.
Yeah, same.
It's totally possible. I mean, my son, he was born around the time I started kind of getting into this stuff. So he was born into a world where there is no fixed tuning system. He's born into a world where there is a total freedom of pitch, because he's heard me making this crazy microtonal music all of his life. And so he has a wonderful taste in music. It's not that he just accepts anything. For him, but there's two types of music, kind of like Duke Ellington said. There's good music and bad music. Either music he likes it or he doesn't like it. And it has absolutely nothing to do with tuning system. Like one of the, sometimes we'll wake up and go to kindergarten, and I'll ask him what music he wants to play, and he'll say gamelan music. And then another day he'll say Harry Parch, and then another day he'll say, well, Charles Mingus. Well, that's not, that's 12, but the pitches of the jazz musicians are quite free.
He is much cooler than I was as a kid.
He's got a sharp ear. He's amazing. Yeah. But it's just proof that 12-ET is a program thing as a preference. It's just been programmed into us. And so now with the Infinitone DMT software, it's really our opportunity to sort of loosen up a bit and to sort of unprogram ourselves and unleash a deeper realm of creativity, within us, so that way we can be much truer to our inner creative expressions.
for sure. And there's definitely something to be said for, I guess, running out of melodies and chord progressions in 12 tone equal temperament, though I'm not sure that many people get to that point. I mean, I think the phenomenon you might see with pop music is that, well, everybody who's listening to that either like doesn't really like music in general that much or is stuck in sort of like naivete of taste, I guess. So really, they're just doing the same thing over and over, and that's fine because the people who are listening to that aren't the kind of people who are concerned with ever doing anything different. So they can afford to repeat themselves endlessly as long as it cycles a little bit.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was funny because I was at a little gathering a few weeks ago, where outside we were keeping our social distance.
Yes, of course.
By the fire, and the man put on a sort of a jazz radio station, online jazz radio station, and the music was phenomenal. It was just every tune that came up was just so good, and I couldn't focus on the conversation. I was just listening to the music. So I think some of the pop music and things like that are good for kind of background music, because you want to socialize, you want to be with your friends, you want to hang out, and you kind of want it to be a little bit in the background. But at the same time, pop music there's a lot of really great stuff out there that I think is also really interesting. And if you watch the way people dance to a lot of pop music, that's interesting.
Yes, for sure.
There's a sort of a complex component to it where people are dancing, and I actually have great admiration for pop musicians, because the ability of being able to communicate with so many people and to resonate with so many people, I think that is an extraordinary talent. And so I think that if some of these musicians were to be able to get microtuning into their hands, they'd be able to even better communicate with the audience, because the power of the music is just going to increase. If you get some GI chords in there, people are just going to feel it.
Oh yeah. And what's great is some of the 12 tone music that already does that naturally, because people are locking into something or they're aiming in a certain way, and things like that. So
well, I could never understand why the Beach Boys sounded so amazing. They're with their vocal harmonies locking in, and barbershop quartets, obviously like that, the vocal harmonies. But yeah, it's all this stuff is natural. That's the thing, is it's so natural and we don't realize it. And so this is just taking what's natural and taking it to the next level, and making it a direct part that we can integrate into ourselves. Because imagine like if you want to cross the street and you say, oh, I'm going to go right over there and cross the street. But if you want to fly to the moon, you need a lot more precision. Or if you want to go to Mars, you need a lot more precision. So when you have a microtuning plugin like this, where you can tune the notes precisely, you can go to a totally different destinations, and you can go to totally different dimensions, even, I would say. And so the more precision that we have and the more freedom that we have to do this, then we're going to take what's natural and just take it to the next level. It's an evolution, you could say.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so you've got the software on your website, Infinitone.com, right? And that's how people can find out more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you want to contact us or have any questions, you can write there. That the full website has not been launched yet, but we're having a website up that will make it available for you to put your email down. You can get on our email list, so you can be informed of the release date, and make sure to get the early release pricing and getting it up. And also on the website, when we launch it in full, is going to be a forum also. So we really want to make it sort of a community-oriented thing as well, where people can go there and sign up for the forum and start to discuss their experience with the software. If they have any questions or anything that wants to be shared, we want to make it a really sort of community collective experience, also working with the software.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks so much for talking to us about it. Could we perhaps listen to some of the demo music that you sent me and talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. We'd love to. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to talk about music, but it's another thing to actually hear music.
Of course.
That's been my goal for a long time, is to convert all of these ideas into sounds. And so these are some of the first steps that I've taken to translate this into sound. And these are not really finished pieces. I call them morsels. They're little bites of possibility, something to kind of stimulate and awaken your creative juices to something that you might want to do yourself, or to, stimulate your imagination and to get, to you to hear possibly things in new ways and all of that. So they're not really finished compositions, but they're possibilities. So this first one that I'll play here is, it's called Here Comes Infinitone, and it's what I would imagine if I opened up a portal to another universe where microtonality, is thriving, and you just open up that door, and the first introductory sound that you would hear maybe would be something like this.
That's very like those introductions that the Sonic Sky has, I think.
Yeah, kind of. They have a lot of great short snippets like that as well.
Or like the synths that are used in like Harkey Music Lovers that Jacob Barton and Dan Sedgwick and Marjorie Gurr did.
Yeah, well, my goal with that was, I'm not surprised that it's, might sound like something else. My goal was to sort of write a microtonal cliche,
Yeah.
I feel like there's all of these microtonal cliches that don't exist yet, and someone has to write them.
So, yes. I want to do a video on this myself because I've noticed them. So you can, there's like one of them, of course, is ascending through something that sounds like a harmonic series as an opening.
Yeah, absolutely. But where are those sounds? Like, there's all this stuff that it's so obvious, but that doesn't exist yet. So we have to make our microtonal cliches. And that was sort of like, okay, here comes microtonality. That was like here's a microtonal cliche for you.
And lots of pitches like in the high range too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I like it. It's very well done. And I like how, so these demo pieces then, they're all composed with the demo itself in mind. Like you sort of made it all together and then made the pieces about various subjects that you introduced.
Yeah. So each one's a sort of, they're just little pieces of music that are designed to demonstrate possibilities with the software. So this one used harmonics, starting harmonic 28, and used the 28 through, what is it, 56, I guess. So I was just demonstrating what you can do with a harmonic series. And this one actually modulates 3 times. Each time the scale goes up, it modulates a common tone. So that's also demonstrating the common tone modulation going up. It's not just a fixed scale.
I see. I wonder if common tone modulation is a microtonal cliche yet.
I don't know.
Well, certainly pitch drifts are, even though they're vastly interesting and people have used them in very different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I don't know. When I think of more cliche, I think of like not maybe the technique, but more like the result of the technique.
Right. So, yeah. Neat. Do you have any other pieces to show us?
Oh, I've got plenty. So this next one here is kind of another one of those, imagine you open up a portal to an alternate dimension, and like the interdimensional beings there are, creating microtonal music, and they're in this dimension, they're using 53 notes for the octave instead of just 12. And so this one actually takes these interdimensional beings. They took inspiration from Earthling John Coltrane's Giant Steps and decided to take things a micro step forward. Here it goes. It's called Stranges, for Coltrane Changes. Strange Coltrane Changes, Stranges.
Wow. Okay, so that one is the one where, yeah, it was like interdimensional aliens, and then the chords themselves are changing by very small intervals of 53. Are they engaging in like really complex tonality flux? To me, it sounds like it's constantly deforming, and I very much love that feeling.
Yep, me too. Yeah, basically what I did is I took the chord changes from giant steps, and I said, well, I'm just going to double the amount of chords. So I basically just added sort of some passing chords in between each of the chords, and I kept all of the chords. I kept them within, I kept inverting them so they would stay within a particular range. So basically, I'm doing the changes from giant steps with passing tones in between, but also doing common tone modulation at the same time within 53 ET. So you're never getting back to the same key. It's like constantly moving somewhere. And that's an example of how you can easily work with, in a larger group of notes within the software. Is that was just all programmed in a DAW. So I was just messing around with the notes. I put in the notes, and I slid them up and down until it sounded right. And if it didn't sound right, then I moved it around a little bit. And there's some places where I decided, well, I'd want to veer from the chord change a little bit just because it sounds like it wants to go there, and I did. And
yeah, I love how you're using a common tone modulation in these pieces. It's very natural, and it gives me an absolutely fantastic idea, which I think is something we might see in a distant microtonal future when people have sort of like evolved techniques to correct certain tunings or deal with certain tuning issues. Like when you said you used common tone modulation, the first thing I thought was, oh, 53 has 5-limit JI that's distinct from its Pythagorean tuning. So I was thinking that you were using common tone modulation to like drift a progression slowly over time back into its original key. I wonder what would happen if we were to see microtonal music that utilized a comma of a fairly small but still noticeable distance, like a syntonic comma, but your software could be used to continually drift the pitch a certain way such that you could have like JI progressions or quasi JI progressions or tempered progressions that would go back to a certain point. Like if you wanted to have like a mean tone chord progression where the mean tone comma wasn't tempered out in a particular tuning, you could just drift that down over and over, and it would start in the same place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I say. What you can do with the software is only limited by the imagination. So I want to see people do that. Yeah, definitely. And whatever modulation, if you want to get back to where you started, you want to modulate somewhere else. I mean, I don't see why should be any particular leaning towards one way or the other. Like all of these techniques have their amazing properties, and they should be used.
Yes, absolutely.
Freedom of pitch. It's free. Do whatever you want.
Yes, that freedom. Wonderful. What's another song from the demo that you think you'd want to show us?
Well, speaking of cliches, like that one had a lot of chords, and so here's a really simple kind of pitch drift JI chord progression that starts out with just very basic 5 and 7 limit chords, and then by the end I sneak in some 11s in there, and this is the kind of thing where 11s. That's it could be a little challenge. That's one of the first things that's challenging for people is working with 11. But I try to do it in such a way that maybe you wouldn't notice. So a lot of the things also with JI is that, or tuning in general, is maybe you don't want people to notice. Maybe it should just be a natural part. Like we don't know what compressor or microphone or whatever what DAW people are using. It's important for the artist, but it's not important for the music. So this is one that, maybe the common listener wouldn't notice.
Oh wow, were there really 11 limit intervals in there?
Yep. The last four chords, the first three of the last four chords had some limit intervals in there.
I think some of the sound cut out also when we were listening to it just now, like the compression is like dropping a lot of it.
Okay. Well, you can listen to it on the. I sent you the file, so you can
Yeah.
and put it in the high. Yeah. Zoom does not do such a good job with quality.
Hey, maybe I'll actually hear the 11 limit intervals when I do that. But yeah, I remember hearing that one, and I remember thinking, okay, this is a little bit like Paco Bell's Canon. It's got like kind of like that JI chord progression vibe where it's like things should be drifting, because like I think there's a minor chord. It's like the sixth chord where like something sounds out of slot to me in like a very nice little pleasant way that I notice because I'm paying attention to the music, but that I think other people might not notice. I've been calling that tugging. It's a certain kind of like Zen harmonics where like something is not quite in a slot that you're used to, like a 12 tet slot, but it's also not really out enough that you notice it as anything like out of tune. So it's just pulling at your ear in a nice way. So that's why I call it tugging. So
I like
that was tugging at my ear.
Yeah, I was using 7/6s there instead of 6/5. So there's a little bit of, you're not so used to the sevens a little bit more off than 7/6, a little more off than 6/5 perhaps. And so that tugging was partly because of that.
Yeah. Okay, so were you using 7/6s initially and then you switched to 6/5 on that strange chord, or is it the other way around?
I started with 7/6s because what I was going for is the sort of the shortest period possible. What I mean by period is the amount of time it takes for the waveform to repeat, like in a chord. So I was, because the 7/6, 1/1 7/6 3/2 has a shorter period than faster beating, you could say, than 1/1 6/5 3/2.
Right.
So I think we notice several things. Our ears tune on to several things in terms of listening to JI and tuning and all of that. And one of the things is simply the period of a chord. And so I was keeping the shortest one possible. And then when I moved it up to tetrads, well, then I went to 6/5 because then that would be shorter. I think I used 1/1 6/5 3/2 9/5. So we're having a 9. Yeah.
I see. I found an interesting effect where if you're using those like 7 limit, minor seventh chords like 1, 7/6, 3/2, 7/4, and then that's contrasted with the character of 1, 6/5, 3/2, 9/5. That can be a bit jarring. It's almost like something that I find unpleasant about the minor seventh of 19 tone equal temperament. Like if it's just a little bit not in that flat pocket, like something is up with it,
Yeah. Well, that's definitely one of the things about exploring these new tuning systems is there's not exactly a theory yet. So
Right.
we have to kind of go on what feels right. And I spent a lot of time with these compositions, at least to figure out what feels right for me. And I think we, discover a lot of rules. Like if you follow this with this and then it doesn't feel right, and you follow this by this and it doesn't feel right. But if you can kind of get it to feel right, if you do this. And I think it's very important just to really listen and open your ears and to just go with your instincts of what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely, yeah. Going with your gut instinct is essential. Well, yeah. Well, thanks so much for showing us those pieces and for talking to us about the Infinitone software. I think we here at the Now and Zen Patreon and any other microtonal enthusiasts are very, very excited to take a look at that.
Yeah, and I will pull. I mean, when the full website goes up, there's going to be a whole bunch more of these demos, and also going to have some also traditional world music culture examples with their related tunings, so that you can hear some of these examples used in by masters of different non-Western music cultures, and then you can go into the program and open up that scale and do something with it yourself. So it's both tradition and future. It's the kind of the ancient future, I like to call it.
Great. Yeah, I think that microtonality inspires that a lot in people. Like, there's either a very, very strong tendency for like preservation of interesting ancient tuning culture, and or there's a tendency towards like unbridled, like progressive, wanting to break all the barriers sorts of things. It's very nice that this software is going to help people sort of from all paths figure out what they want to do.
Absolutely. That's why I say it should be in every musician's toolkit, because as musicians we use pitch, and so we should have tools to work with pitch. And it's exactly, you're exactly right. And I think you put it in a very, very good way. And the way that I like to say it is it simply expands the range of creative expression. It makes the extremes more extreme. It makes makes the dissonances more dissonant. It makes the consonances more consonant. There's more colors. There's more possibilities. So absolutely, yeah, you can go further into the past, further in your tradition, deeper in your tradition, or you can do wild and like your album, Stephen. Emoticons. Oh, I don't even know what to say about it. It's just mind blowing. Like it's so absurd and so crazy that it makes me speechless. So it's like, yeah, that's like one of the extremes. Like you're one of the far extremes that I've ever heard.
Well, thank you.
I think when I was studying in India, one of my teacher, he looked over to me once in a profound moment and he said, "There is only one note and only one beat."
Oh no.
Which has got my philosophical brain spinning for years now.
Yeah, because you could just compare anything to one note if you wanted, but what would that one note be?
Ooh, Stephen, now you're asking the deep questions. We need
It's probably just middle C.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's just middle C. Really? That's it? Oh,
that would be so underwhelming.
What a relief.
Yeah.
Think about it anymore.
Oh, by the way, this is random, but I wanted to ask you one more question about the Infinitone. What is the visual interface like?
Yeah, so basically what you see is the main view in the middle is at the top. There's the main active subset view, the main scale view, and it just has vertical lines. It has basically a 12 ET reference at the bottom, so you can get an idea where the pitch is, and then just vertical lines horizontally spaced according to the spacing of the notes. And like I said, they'll be color coded either with sort of a color wheel kind of scheme, or based on primes if it's a JI tuning. And then below that are smaller rows with 64 possibilities for subsets. So you can have up to 64 scales up on the screen, and you can just scroll through them and click whatever you want, and you can rearrange them in whatever way you want. You can copy and paste and do all.
You can automate them, like automate when it changes to what.
You can automate it when it changes to what exactly, and then you can choose which one. And then there's at the very bottom, there's the morphing section, and you can choose morph A and starting point A and going to B, and you just select whatever subset you want. Each subset has its own parameters, like you can, for each subset you have a fundamental frequency, you have the key, the MIDI note on which the fundamental frequency is placed. You can do stretch tuning also, so it's kind of stretch. Another thing I forgot to mention, you have modes also. So if you have a tuning, then you can rotate through all of the modes as well.
That's so nice.
One tuning is not just a scale. You get all of the permutations. So basically, if you went through all of them, you would get a diamond.
Right.
And speaking of diamonds, and then you can, so you have your master set, and you can choose which notes to include or exclude. There's tools for, transposing the fundamental for modulation. And so that's on the right side, and below that, there's a sort of a note focus where you see what note that you're playing, you see the ratio. And then if you want to make it a custom scale, then you can adjust the pitch of any individual note according to your tastes. And then on the left side, there's the tuning generators, which is, like I said, at the beginning, we're offering a harmonic tuning generator with sort of prime filters. We're offering basic EDO, not EDO, because that's octave, equal division of any repeat ratio, and then a linear plus lattice scale generator and a custom input generator. And then at the very bottom right corner, there's beating and detuning possibilities, where you can get the notes to beat either rationally, so they all are beating by the same sort of perceived interval size, or you can get them to beat by frequency. So you can have all of the notes beating by, say, 1 hertz, like 1 second or 2, and then that's also a parameter. So you can get them to beat wow, 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 something like that.
Oh, that is so exciting. I think that is not a very common feature of a lot of synthesizers I know, like that beating feature. I know there's some sense where like you can put the beating in yourself, where if you have some sounds that are tuned to the same interval and they're represented in interfaces like oscillators, maybe you could change one of them to be just a little bit different, and then you would have that. But to have that kind of control over the beating in sort of a precise way, where I want it to beat this much for this amount of time, has always been, like, I think, a big dream of lots of people, like including Sevish.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think so as well. That's why we put it in there. And I'm glad to hear that there's a lot of people out there who want that.
Oh, yeah, I think there's going to be so many people who want it, because that's honestly part of the big appeal of a lot of this, is like people figuring out that they can make wah-wah noises. Like, but I think for a lot of them, it's just easier in 12-tet, because like those synths might have that kind of thing built in and they can just modulate that already. But then doing it with a tuning conscious perspective this way also seems like it's really going to open up a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Man,
mean,
I wanted this for my emoji album. Oh my God.
You got to have a follow-up.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about emoji part 2. I don't have enough ideas to make it as solid as part 1, but maybe I just need another track that's like 50 minutes.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not just necessarily beating. I mean, you can expand the beating, the extra note, to kind of any size that you want and control it. But there's also detuning also. So if you have your JI, chord, but it's a little bit too JI for you, it's a little bit too pure and simple, and you can choose to say you want to detune your tuning table by plus or minus this amount of cents, and you can do it permanently where it stays there, or you can do it continually. So every time you play, it's going to be a little bit detuned in a different way. So it's more kind of, you could say, humanized.
I was about to ask about that. Yeah, because it seems like, the way humans do it, it's always like comfortably and realistically detuned within a small window.
Absolutely. So you can sort of simulate that then with your, with the MIDI instruments. If we get people using microtones, the creative, social, political changes, I think, are just going to be absolutely astounding to witness, and it's going to be wonderful. I mean, people are these days, they're so kind of frustrated, and could we even say depressed or challenged about what's going on in the world these days. And I think that these new possibilities that exist in microtonality offer really so much hope, because right here at our fingertips, we have access to create a creative revolution unlike we've ever seen before. I think the music that we could be hearing in the next 10 years as people develop this is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. So it in a world where people are waking up worried and sad and scared, and I totally understand why, but I wake up in the morning hearing microtones in my head and the possibility of these new music, and it gets me going for the day. I get up in the morning and I'm just really excited to move forward and see the stuff come to life.
That's what it does for me too.
Right. Well, and you're doing such an amazing job, helping that to come about. And so I thank you for that, and I thank you for having me here. And great honor to be here. I mean, you've interviewed like the top microtonal musicians and composers in the world, some who have inspired me tremendously. I mean, you did recently an interview with Paul Dolden, where he does all of this crazy, microtonal stuff, changing from one tuning to another, and that was, he was one of my main inspirations for creating a software like this, because I thought, wow, he's using all kinds of tunings in one composition, so we got to have a tool to do that. And
yeah, he really raised the bar really high.
Really high. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and then a whole bunch of other these that you've interviewed, and also yourself. I mean, you've been a great inspiration to me, and the fact that you're doing this podcast is such a great service to the world.
I've enjoyed creating this podcast for the time that I have created it, and I definitely want to come back to it. I'm tempted to, if things don't grow enough, I can be like, I'll come back starting on this day, unless I get 60 patrons, and then I'll come back then. Because like, I love doing it, but it's always like I'm always in this situation where I go to work and I come back and I'm exhausted and I'm like, okay, it's time to finally compose and feel very, very good about that and about my life. Oh wait, I have to edit now and then.
Right. I understand. Yeah, I mean that's the challenge for me with the software is I just want to be composing, and then
right.
The software development is very, very, very time consuming. So I can understand, but we got to get you back somehow. You do a great job of this. It's an incredible service to the world, and I think you're just getting started. There's going to be so many more amazing musicians that are coming out with great music, and now that something like this, like a tools like this, and is coming out soon, everybody's going to can have it in their hands. You're going to have a lot more people to interview, and
yes, I'm sure
we got to work that out somehow.
Yeah, I also wonder if somebody else, if they did a podcast differently, how that would turn out, and I would love to sort of hear how that would happen.
Oh, there's got to be more than one microtonal podcast. It's good, it validates the whole thing. Like if there's a couple of them, then people think it's not just this fringe thing that weird people are doing, but it's actually something that's real. I just met that there's somebody else who's also doing a microtoning plugin, and it's also supposed to come out this year. And I like, and our first reactions were like, "What? We have a competitor?" But then,
oh my gosh,
But then we wanted to be the first. No, but then we realized, man, this is fantastic because it validates it validates the whole thing, and then we can work together and we can establish kind of common ways of communicating. And I think at this point, the more the merrier. There is no competition. Let's just all do it and get it out there. And there's so much possibility in this domain. There's enough to go around. There's no need to hoard.
Right.
It's so much, and there's no way that one piece of software can cover everything. I mean, my software is just covering a few things, even though it covers a lot. It's just a few compared to what's possible. So yeah, there's going to be more. You're coming back, Stephen. We'll get you back.
Okay. Yeah.
We love you.
I mean, I definitely want to come back.
Your podcast has made my life like so much better in these last, how long have you been doing it for? I mean, I lose track of time.
Oh, I think we started it technically in 2018, but it was like right towards the end of it. So I guess I've been doing it for about 2 years, a little bit longer.
Yeah. Well, I'll be like cleaning the dishes, but I'll just be so happily doing it because I'm listening to your podcast.
Oh, yes. That's great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I moved from like it's like a 6-hour drive in the moving truck. I was listening to your podcast.
Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah. Well, we'll try to on the Patreon account, I'm still going to try and have monthly bonus content, but it might not be like it would be about something that one would talk about on a podcast, but might be something like a topical video or analysis or something like that.
Sure. Well, that's a good good interim thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like there's not a lot of topical videos on microtonality from like a true like diehard microtonalist perspective. One video I really, really want to do with like a really catchy thumbnail and everything with me like holding up a magnifying glass would be a video called like, how many notes can we fit in an octave? I mean, you can imagine that being clickbait, right?
Oh man, well, I used to have this idea of like, what if we put the notes in an octave and even the notes, maybe you could say in the range of human hearing, whatever. And what if we did like an installation like on Manhattan, like in New York, and you at at the bottom by the Statue of Liberty, you start with like the lowest note, like 20 hertz, and then you do all of these microtonal steps all the way up to the top, so you have like a better perspective of like what really is within an octave, because we see it on a keyboard and we think, oh, there's not that space there, but there's a lot of space.
Wow, that's a really cool idea. Pitch in a tall building. I love it. I haven't heard of that. Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought, yeah, but
That's
just to sort of expand the perspective, spatially, because when we see it on a violin or a piano, I think, well, there can't be that many microtones, right? I mean, there's not that much you could do. There's not that much space there, but
wrong. Oh, incredible. I love it. Well, I think with how many notes we can fit in an octave, actually, in the Discord, we were coming up with an extremely amusing amount. Although I didn't really calculate it myself, but it's like, let's say that when it comes to how many notes you can cram in an octave, you try and think about a lot of different questions. Like, one question you could think about is, what's the smallest distance we can notice? And that's different depending on different contexts. So,
Right.
like, for me, I consider like a legitimate like microtonal step size to be somewhere around like 25 to 35 cents as an entity. But of course, you can hear smaller than that. It's just that if you hear smaller than that, you get this effect where like you're retuning the same note. And that's kind of like what it feels like. Unless the pitch is very straight and the timbre is very peculiar, which can happen. So there's always exceptions to everything. And then as you keep going down, you get to the melodic JND of about 5 cents, which varies over the range of pitch that we can hear and also isn't exactly absolute among all humans. It's like if you train to hear a lower melodic difference, you can hear it, but you would never expect a performer like who's singing to hit like 702 cents versus 701. Like it's just not something that people can do that precisely in that way. But you can nudge a pitch by 2 cents and somebody can hear it. It just has to be the timbre clues just have to be really helping you out. So there's that kind of thing. Then after that, you get to a really, really small range where, okay, what's a really, really small melodic interval where the change of timbre is kind of like the only thing helping it. So you're not really sure if it's going up or down. And then after that, you come to unnoticeable differences that are still noticeable in phase. So like if you're holding two pitches and you nudge something by a very, very small amount, you can notice the beating pattern change if that's done in a clinical enough way. And then you think about how that actually changes the volume of the two held pitches, and how if you do this over a long period of time, you can hear the volume swell and decrease. Paul Erlich was talking about this in the tuning group, and he was complaining that somebody used a billion EDO in one of their songs because I don't think the synthesizer could handle it realistically. And Paul was saying that you could hear the difference between two adjacent pitch classes if you just held them and over a very long time listen to the volume disappear and go down. So then the smallest pitch distance that would ever matter in any situation would have to do with finding the optimal pitch range for this in terms of Fletcher-Munchen curves and getting two pitches that when they are held against each other for the entirety of the longest human lifetime produce a just unnoticeable change in volume for that entire time.
Oh man, I must say I have never thought about it like that before.
I never thought about it until the other day, and then people were talking about it, and I was like, wait, this would be like really funny if somebody figured this out. And like, I'm sure it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm not sure how little it would be, but
well, there's so many ways to think about it and to explore it, and it just really depends on the context and what you're going for. I mean, a lot of times I feel that I can't hear differences, but I can feel them.
Yes,
like,
yes.
I feel that like we're not just hearing these sounds with our ears, but we're our bodies are vibrating. Our bodies are basically fluid, and these are resonant vibrating systems. And I think sometimes there's some tuning changes, and for example, like some of the higher prime harmonics. Amelia Huff has been sharing her thoughts about using some of the higher primes, and while they might not make sense in terms of plus or minus this amount of cents, but when you're working with these kind of higher prime intervals, and somehow they all fit together in this really beautiful, strange way, and my body just kind of loves it. So there's that one I can't really quantify in terms of its plus or minus this amount of cents or beating like this. It just, I don't know, it just sounds good.
Yeah, it's very interesting that everything would fit in, and you wouldn't notice it as a lock and ring, but you would still notice it as maybe like just an overall good feeling.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like kind of healing, in fact, and I think that some of this JI stuff could actually, potentially even make people feel better if they're not feeling well. Heal disease. I don't know. Perhaps could be explored.
Yeah, for sure. Great. All right, awesome. Well, I am like super, super out of time, but I've had a great time talking to you.
Yeah, me too. It's also 1:36 a.m. and I have to go to bed.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for everything. I look forward to your podcast coming back again soon.
Yes, it will have a return.
People who are listening, go to the website now, and infinitone.com, infinitone.com, and just get on the email list, and we'll let you know when it's available.
Okay, Infinitone hype through the roof.
Yeah.
Yes.
Promotion.
Great. All righty. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks, Stephen.